It took 48 years for US households to have 100% electricity. Similarly, penetration of radio and refrigerator took 47 years. Cell phones, computers and internet took around 25 years each to reach 80% of the population. In comparison, social media took less than a decade to reach 80% of American households. The technology adoption curve has got steeper with electric vehicles. 5% seems to be the inflection point at which most technologies get ready for mass adoption. The time it takes to get to that level varies widely by country. But once the universal challenges of car cost, charger availability, and driver skepticism are solved for the few, the masses soon follow. According to a Bloomberg analysis, in 2022, 19 countries had passed what's become a critical EV tipping point. Since then, 5 more countries have made that leap. In the US, the EV tipping point did arrive until late 2021. The reason for such a delay in EV adoption was the demand for longer range batteries and charging infrastructure. But by the second quarter of 2023, the penetration of EVs in the US auto market had reached 42%. Where are we in India? India is the third largest auto market after China and the US. EVs made up 3% of new car sales in the country in the June quarter of 2023, after doubling in just 6 months. So the country seems to be at a tipping point for EV adoption, which is why India's homegrown automakers have been investing heavily in electrification. But even as we get closer to the EV inflection point, fact is that India has remained a laggard compared to the global peers. For instance, domestic sales of EVs have more than doubled in the past year, but they barely represent 2% of the total light vehicle sales in the last 12 months. A couple of domestic auto majors have lined up plans for EV exports, but India has yet to make its presence felt in the international market with powerful EVs. Moreover, we are also lagging in related segments such as battery manufacturing and charging infrastructure. The government has offered tax reduction and production-linked incentives to encourage EV production. Launched in 2015 by the Centre, the FAME initiative, Faster Adoption and Manufacturing of EVs, was meant to reduce the usage of gas and diesel in automobiles. It also aimed to incentivize electric vehicles. However, the adoption of EVs in both two-wheelers and passenger cars has been way below expectations so far. The relatively sparse charging infrastructure in India has impeded the widespread adoption of electric vehicles. It has hindered the progress towards green energy goals too. In 2015, for instance, electric car sales in China cumulatively crossed 100,000. At that time, the country had 1 public charger for every 4 electric cars. As India crosses the milestone of cumulative 100,000 electric cars sold this year, the country has 1 public charger for every 13 electric cars. Europe has a public charger for every 3 electric cars and the United States for every 6, says the International Energy Agency. Then there's the problem of non-interoperability of the charging stations. A person who travels between cities may need to have 3 to 5 apps for charging infrastructure providers, and that's a hassle. Moreover, a lot of the charging stations aren't discoverable on Google Maps. A common platform for discovering and accessing or paying for the charging is very much needed. There are several charging point operators in India, but none have the scale like that of Tata Power. Globally, Tesla's huge advantage is that in its major markets, the superchargers, which around are 50,000 worldwide, are reliable and seamless. The charging is free and the charger recognizes the car as it's a closed ecosystem. In India, almost all automakers have schemes to offer free or concessional charging, but only in the very early days. Most charging is on a pay-per-use basis. A World Bank analysis concluded that investing in the charging infrastructure is 4 to 7 times more effective in EV adoption than providing upfront purchase subsidies. So, steep prices of EVs, limited charging infrastructure, and regulatory bottlenecks are the deterrents even at the EV tipping point in India. Getting non-EV players to become part of the EV charging value chain could offer a massive push to EV adoption. Plus, fleet aggregators should also be encouraged to operate EVs across India. Now, there are entities that are indirect plays on the EV boom. They could be less subject to the cyclical demand and the regulatory risks of EV makers. Take this case for instance. With the government introducing various incentive schemes for electric vehicles, the EVs pose a threat to CNG fuel vehicles in the medium to long term. Buses account for 20% of CNG volumes, while taxis and the three-wheelers account for 30% of CNG volumes. So, with proliferation of EVs, the future of CNG vehicles could be questionable, right? Indraprastha gas, which caters to the CNG requirement of almost the entire CNG fleet in Delhi and adjoining areas, is preparing itself for meeting the challenge. It is doing so by becoming a part of the value chain in electric mobility business and setting up electric charging facilities at its CNG stations. The company has already installed and commissioned 4 fixed EV charging stations in the NCT area of Delhi and has also rolled out its battery swapping facility for two-wheelers and three-wheelers. Besides this, in order to explore the EV investment opportunities in the value chain, that is battery manufacturing and swapping, the company is in discussions with leading players in the field of EV landscape. Indraprastha Gas is working on more than 50 charging stations and on some other initiatives for EV refueling. It is expecting to get a major chunk of the EV recharging business from cab aggregators, which may have to adopt EV fleets on priority as per government regulations. So, even as some of the larger EV makers and battery producers await the EV tipping point in India, companies like Indraprastha Gas that can indirectly ride the EV charging boom in the meanwhile should be on your watch list. Hope you like this video. Thanks for watching.